The inside story on the issues that affect you and your community. This is Local 12 Newsmakers.
Good morning and welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers. I'm Dan Hurley. It is that time of the year. Road construction projects are gearing up across the region. This year, a record $2.5 billion will go towards 936 Ohio transportation projects. Locally, work to add 2 lanes to I-75 in Hamilton County will continue, while in June, construction of the new Martin Luther King interchange off I-71 will begin. A new loop ramp at the Fields-Erdel Road exit designed to relieve congestion, and on I-275 Route 32 interchange will be rebuilt. On May the 6th, on the Ohio primary ballot, depending on where you live, you will see multiple local tax issues and levies. But only one issue will be on everybody's ballot across the state. Issue 1 is a 10-year renewal of a 27-year-old program that has helped fund 11,500 road, bridge, sewer, water, and solid waste projects across the state. Issue 1 will generate $175 million a year for the next 5 years, and then $200 million per year for the following 5 years. This is a renewal of a long-standing program that is baked into the state budget and the planning process and will not result in a tax increase. To discuss Issue 1, I am joined by Greg Hartmann, a member of the Hamilton County Commission and the statewide co-chair for Strong Ohio, along with Columbus Mayor Michael Coleman and the president of the Ohio Chamber of Commerce and the AFL-CIO, the statewide campaign to promote Issue 1. Greg, welcome back to Newsmakers.
Good to be with you.
You know, this is one of those projects that, and we'll get to the support question later on, but when you look at all the co-chairs, it says something. Republican, Democrat, AFL-CIO, Chamber of Commerce. There's a broad level of support here, but despite that, I think people don't necessarily understand what exactly this issue will do. So in Hamilton County, what kinds of things would Issue 1 be important for?
Sure. I mean, things you mentioned, like MLK, like the Western Hills Viaduct. I mean, every project has got a local component and a state component. The federal government, no good anymore. They're not, earmarks are gone. They're not fully funding these projects. So this issue represents how we fund public infrastructure here in Hamilton County. And since the inception of the program, it's brought over $300 million here. So it really is good government.
$300 million to Hamilton County.
That's right, since 1987. So this is not new. It's really one of the most successful programs we've got in the state of Ohio. It's just a renewal. It's not a tax increase, and it really represents good government.
Well, on projects, let's say we're talking about basically a maintenance type of project. What percentage would the state be willing to fund on a road project that is mostly a maintenance question, or a stormwater sewer or whatever?
I mean, there's a state part to everything, and we've got a local commission that decides who gets in the front of the line. But without this program, many projects just would not get done because, for instance, in Hamilton County, our general fund funds a lot of services, sheriff's department. We don't have a lot of money to put directly into roads. Without the state's role, we couldn't do at least half of the projects that we currently do.
On that same front, though, okay, I live in a community. There are some roads that are state roads, and there are some roads that are local roads. Does this money only go to state highways?
No, it's just the state component, right? So it goes to...
It could go anywhere.
I think it's more likely that it goes to more local roads. I mean, which is why, you know, we talk about the big projects that are easy to identify, but if you live in a neighborhood and that road gets rebuilt, part of that funding stream is paid for by the state through this program.
What about, I mean, the big kahuna that we have been talking about for years and will continue to talk about for years is the replacement, the supplemental bridge for the Brent Spence Bridge. Can this be a factor there?
It can't. You might not be surprised to hear I've been asked that question before, but that's a federal project. That bridge is owned by Kentucky, so that prohibits these dollars for going to that project. That's a similarly complex problem. I mean, I think on the bridge, I'll say similarly, if we're going to just wait on the federal government to do it, it's not going to happen.
Right.
That's the one similarity it has with this project. That is, locally, in partnership with the state, we've got to be collaborative, and we've got to come up with solutions ourselves.
You know, that bridge, everybody thinks of it as a bridge, but it's really all of the approaches. It's, if I remember correctly, it's 8 to 9 miles of expressway to and from the bridge on either side of the river. Could some of this money help rebuild 75 leading up to the bridge?
Yes.
Okay.
So the bridge project involves lots of other different projects,
right,
including the MLK interchange. Money from this will help that project, and it'll also help many of the different exits, but the actual bridge itself has gotten tied up in this tolls discussion. So until that issue gets resolved, mainly by Kentucky, because Ohio is really there already. If it gets resolved, which I think it will in the future, our governor is saying let's keep doing our part in this process, and hopefully they'll come along with us.
Yeah, well, and that's every discussion we've had on this show about that bridge, trying to remind people that the bridges are the responsibility of Kentucky, that they take the lead in all of this, and Ohio, sometimes we forget that, being from Kentucky originally. So anyway, so there are things that it can't pay for, and we're talking about roads here, but it's not just roads. It's not just roads and bridges. It's also things like sewers. And Hamilton County is in the midst of a major redoing of our sewer system. Does this money also feed into that?
It can. I mean, it can help in that project. I mean, these dollars do things like help expand sewers into new areas, new developments that need sewers. We are in a process and under a federal consent decree where we are mandated to replace many of our sewer systems in the region. And from my perspective, that's been a real nightmare to deal with because it's resulted in big-time increased sewer costs. That you know, has the potential to drive people out of town. We're doing all we can to drive those costs down, have achieved about $100 million in savings through our active role. It's a complicated process. The city runs it, the county owns it. We've got some disputes about contracting currently going on, but ultimately our #1 job has got to be to try to hold these costs down for ratepayers.
And we can talk about that part of it some other time.
Sure.
But, you know, the one thing when I look at this, I see, you know, it's infrastructure, roads, bridges, sewers, water treatment, solid waste, et cetera, et cetera. And when I think of infrastructure in the future, what I don't see listed here is things that are connected to digital, cyber, fiber, which in terms of the future of our economy is the sort of fundamental infrastructure as well. Is this, the language is this set into these traditional ways of thinking about infrastructure?
This is kind of old school thinking, and the language does allow for kind of expansion into what in the future could be utilities. I agree with you. I mean, I think that the kind of traditional model of what government does and what it funds, we got to stick to the basics on this one. I mean, we've got to provide good roads. It's not just for convenience sake. It's for business. If our roads can't be navigable for commerce, we're not going to go anywhere as a community. I mean, Ohio really is on the rebound. We're growing jobs, and we've got to have a 20th century, 21st century infrastructure to go along with that.
Let's talk a little bit about what I was hinting at the beginning, which is the broad base of support for this. When this went through the legislature, only 2 people in the legislature voted against it. And that's sort of amazing in our own day right now when so many things instantly divide people right down the aisle and we get huge splits. There's a lot of consensus around this.
Absolutely. Literally no one is against this. I mean, people that think that
I'll come back to somebody, but go ahead. Okay.
People that think that we ought to just let roads deteriorate and maybe use our money elsewhere, but government has a role in providing infrastructure on which business operates. And we've got the support of a union, of the Chamber of Commerce, of Republicans, Democrats, big city mayors, county commissioners. I mean, everyone is for this, but we've got to get the word out. You don't ever take anything for granted that appears on the ballot. This is not an increase in taxes. I think that's critical. It shouldn't be viewed in terms of levies that appear in many different jurisdictions. This is a renewal. The money is set aside to pay back the interest on these bonds which will be issued. So it's not a tax increase. It's just a renewal of a program that has done very good by Ohio.
Let's be clear about how this actually operates. This is basically authorizes the state to issue bonds, which are then paid out of the revenues of the general revenue. So people would say there's debt being taken on. You're taking on bonded debt, which you do have to pay off. So it's not a levy in that normal sense, but it's bonded debt.
Well, there's good debt and bad debt. I mean, when you buy a house, many times you're not paying cash for that house. That's debt that you can then write off those interest payments on your taxes. That's good debt. This is good debt because it's investing in the future of Ohio, using our strong budget. We've got a great bond rating, so we can borrow very cheaply the dollars and put them back into the state that we live in.
One of the components of the support for this is the labor community. And what kind of jobs does this mean for, I mean, you can talk statewide or you can talk locally, whatever, but this is also really about jobs.
Absolutely. It's about jobs. It's about the business community. This will create over 50,000 jobs throughout the life of this program. I mean, this is a critical part of the economy of Ohio as well. And seeing this kind of broad level of support has made it fun to be involved with, frankly, to work across political lines and across with people that sometimes you're on the opposite side of.
Yeah, it must be nice, actually, to have people generally supporting this. Now, Jim Burns, who has run for many offices locally, 8 or 9, and he is a libertarian. He issued a statement a couple of weeks ago in which he said that he was opposed to this because local communities should be doing these kinds of projects themselves. The state shouldn't be taking out debt which our children will have to pay off. What do you say to that?
Well, I mean, the debt, I'd say a couple things. I mean, one, the debt is being paid off currently, and we've got a long-term plan to do that without raising taxes. 2, many of the projects that this money is going to go to would not be done if it was only funded locally. I mean, that's just the reality of the cost of a lot of these projects. It requires partnerships. We don't have a partner like we used to in the federal government because a lot of the problems they've had in Washington. This is the utmost in collaboration between state and local governments. It fills a critical role for government, and that is providing the infrastructure that some people and maybe even some opponents, the few, if you can find them, have taken for granted. But we all need infrastructure to do the jobs that we do.
I would say 2 things too. Sort of the political scientist part of me wants to say local government is an extension of state government. I mean, that makes that split doesn't make any sense to me. When you're talking about state versus federal, that has a different constitutional split. But local and state, we're all the same.
Absolutely.
We're Ohio.
Absolutely.
And secondly, if it was done locally, we'd either have to take out bonds locally and pay them off on a smaller tax base, or we would have to raise the money first with higher taxes and then pay it off. I mean, it's still, you have to do it.
I mean, I'll say what I said earlier. This is good government. It makes a whole lot of fiscal sense the way we fund infrastructure in the state of Ohio. And, we're encouraging citizens to vote for Issue 1 on May 6th to continue really an incredible legacy of success.
Yeah, and there is a website that people can go to. It's www.strongohio. There's a little slash there, .com, and it gives you the basic information if you want to review that before you go to the polls. But it's This is one of those ones that's it's interesting, the dynamics that are put together. Greg, thanks for being here this morning.
Thank you.
Thanks for taking the time to lead this statewide.
Happy to.
Stay tuned. After the break, the latest approaches and efforts to treat victims of sexual abuse.
I was molested for 8 years, which kind of stinked, but, and I was also raped last summer.
When I found out that Allison had been molested and raped, which totally blew my mind because we were very close and I did not have a clue, and it was happening right next door.
I didn't really know how to deal with it because I coped with it really bad. I didn't know what to do. I was confused, and so I went to drugs, and my life went downhill.
Welcome back. Every time a dramatic case of child abuse makes the headlines, people want to know, why wasn't that preventable? What can be done to help the child who was abused? And what can be done to make sure that the perpetrator never abuses a child again? Here are some statistics that throw light on those questions and suggest one organization and the approach that might help.
Family Nurturing Center helped by teaching me ways to cope in healthy ways and to basically be open about it.
I am joined now by two people, Jane Herms, the Executive Director of the Family Nurturing Center, and Gary Hudson, who is a board member at the Family Nurturing Center. Both of you, welcome to Newsmakers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That video, which was produced by the Family Nurturing Center, voice of a young person, very powerful statement. So, who is it, Jane, on a day-by-day basis that you're really working with here?
You know, there really is no typical child when it comes to abuse. We see children as young as 3 years old and all the way up to 17 and 18, and we see adults who were abused as children. So, you know, the sad fact is that sexual abuse can happen to anyone, and it doesn't matter how old or young they are, what income they are, where they live, what religion they are. It crosses all of those boundaries.
And Gary, as a trustee, what is it that usually brings a person, a young person, or a family, or parents who maybe find out that something's happened? What brings people to the Family Nurturing Center?
Well, a Family Nurturing Center is world-class at what it does, and tremendously affordable. So there are wonderful opportunities for people to receive service free. There's a wide range of services. So, for example, let's say a child is sexually abused. That child can receive counseling at the same time that the parents are simultaneously receiving counseling in another room in the evening in a time that's convenient for them. So I think it's great programs that are affordably, wonderfully delivered by really high-quality people.
How long has the Family Nurturing Center been around?
35 years,
Okay.
and started by volunteers and very much a grassroots effort.
And is it something that, is it an organization that is actively reaching out to contact people, not only to counsel after something's happened, but also raise attention to this issue and maybe provide some skills for people to prevent something from happening?
Absolutely. Our goal is prevention. We have to provide treatment because the reality is there are millions of people walking around already who have suffered abuse. But our real goal is prevention, and we do that in a number of ways, but primarily through our Stewards of Children program, which teaches adults ways to recognize, prevent, and respond to child sexual abuse.
I have no idea, because it wasn't identified in the video, but just the way the adult in that, she says something was happening next door. I have the impression that this was a neighbor. You know, if somebody thinks something might be happening, she says she had no idea, but if you were worried, what should somebody do? Should they contact the police? Should they contact the Family Nurturing Center? What should they do?
It's a great question, and I think the short answer is 241 kids in the greater Cincinnati area. That's the short answer. The longer answer would be most people aren't going to know, and so how do you solve that problem? And when I say most people won't know, I say that because the typical perpetrator, unfortunately, looks just like you and me. Perpetrators are, I mean, we see it on TV, right? They are teachers, they are parents, they are pastors, priests. They're right in the middle of all of us. They're community leaders, they're charismatic, which they need to be to accomplish what they want to accomplish without being at risk of being caught. And so how do you spot that is I think the $64 question, and there's no simple answer, but the way to figure that out is to be trained in the program that Family Nurturing Center offers, which is Darkness to Light's training program. And so I think the real answer is we all need a higher level of education. We just need to understand what sexual abuse is, how it happens, how perpetrators do what they do, and when you have a little bit of knowledge, it's amazing the signs just sort of become very clear. Yeah.
Jane, you and I met a while ago around a program focused on trauma-informed care. And these are clearly, the victims here, the children, would be people who have gone through a trauma. Is there effective counseling, treatment, care that can allow a person who has been abused to overcome that and move on with their life without that just being there the whole rest of their life?
There's absolutely effective treatment, and that's really important to know that there is hope and healing, but it is important to get treatment and care because for too many people, they continue to keep it a secret through their childhood, through their adulthood. We recently had an 85-year-old woman contact us and ask for counseling services. She was sexually abused when she was 7 and had never told anybody. So the idea that it continues to impact you throughout your life without help, but there is really good quality evidence-based counseling and services out there, and we provide this for free.
So how many children, I'm not quite sure how to ask this question, how many children, how many families does the Family Nurturing Center work with, say, in a year?
We actually see 30,000 people a year.
30,000?
30,000 through a range of prevention, education, and treatment. So in the schools, working with adults and PTAs and community groups, but also providing those evidence-based therapies. Right now we have 86 kids on our waiting list. 86
children waiting for counseling. So
yes.
How many staff members do you have? Counselors do you have?
Counselors, 2.5. 2.5.
Mm-hmm. So, and I would suspect, I guess it varies from case to case, but I would suspect that counseling is not quick and simple. This can take a long time.
That's absolutely correct. So people can stay on that waiting list for a long time.
Can organizations that deal with children, could they partner with, reach out to Family Nurturing Center and ask for help?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. You know, one of the things that we are really working toward is getting youth-serving organizations, so that's a kind of a generic term we use for anybody who obviously helps out with kids, takes care of kids. That could range from a volunteer soccer organization to a professional after-school rec center, and that those organizations get together and talk with us about their standards of care for kids. And the simplest thing we can, again, to sort of not to beat a drum, is the simplest thing we can say is everybody on staff needs to be trained so that they have a common language, a common understanding of what child sexual abuse is, how it happens, how to recognize the signs, and how to prevent it. So simple things like 80% of the time child sexual abuse occurs in a one-on-one adult child or older child, younger child situation. And so if you're running an organization that serves kids, one of the absolute rules anybody who walks through the door should know is, hey, we're never alone one-on-one with a kid.
Last point, because I'm out of time, but you are running workshops almost all the time, right?
We are.
That are available.
So the Stewards of Children program are free. They're appropriate for any adults. They're available in Campbell, Kenton, Boone, Grant, and Hamilton counties. And call us because we'd love to come to your place of business or organization.
And I want to let people know how to get in touch with you. To find out more about the Family Nurturing Center or to reach out for help, check out the website at familynurture.com. That's a .com, not a .org. Or
it's .org.
It's a .org?
Yes.
Okay. In Kentucky, call 859-535-3200, or in Ohio, 513-382-1555. Thank you for being here this morning. Thank you for your work in the community.
Thank you.
Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. Join us again next week to meet the men and the women working to shape our region for the future. Have a good week.